not here on earth to build our own kingdom. We're here to help spread blessings to other people. We make a covenant to our children, not only my children, but the children of this church, that will take a serious role in their lives. We make a covenant to the other people who join this church, wherever they might come from, and whatever their circumstance. And so God's commitment to us reflects, we reflect that in our commitment to other people, and that includes, He puts us in a place.
The Reformed Presbyterian Church has had a presence in Wilkinsburg since the 1840s. And in fact, the original church building is over on Center and South here in Wilkinsburg. We outgrew it and then came here to the Swissvale property that we have currently. The interesting piece of the history of the building is that when Swissvale was being expanded, the building that Calvary Presbyterian Church owned at that time was deconstructed and reconstructed around the corner as St. Mark's AME. And then this thing was built.
This is a wonderful facility. It was United Presbyterian Church before we got here. They rented to us, and then when they disbanded as a congregation, they actually gave us the building.
And the congregation at one point had to really make a decision, are they going to stay here in Wilkinsburg or move out to the suburbs? And they made a conscientious decision to stay in Wilkinsburg and be a congregation for the neighborhood. And that's not usual. Many of our congregations are rural, many of our congregations are suburban, so people obviously can drive to them. They have much greater regional or need to commute to them, that kind of thing. Ours very much, though, has a philosophy that says we're here for our neighborhood. So that was the kind of the impetus for our neighborhood's in trouble, and it needs some help. So how can we help?
We view what we're doing as a collaboration, not just bestowing something on somebody like we have more clout than they do. Neighborhoods like this tend to get that kind of help from people, including the government, but also other agencies. It's like, we're going to swoop in, we're going to do this initiative, and then we're going to go away. What can we do? How can we be committed and stay committed? And what does that look like?
We have some different programs that are geared towards helping the community. We have Kids Zone on Tuesday nights.
And we have a Bible lesson, activities, a meal. We started with just giving kids a snack, and we found out that a lot of kids come from homes where they're food poor. They're not getting as much to eat as they should. And we even found kids taking food back to their families. And whenever we gave them a meal, they would just gobble down everything, including all the vegetables. And we said, these kids, they could use food. So a meal, a complete meal is always part of that.
We did start a nonprofit called Wilkinsburg Christian Housing to do some of that work as well, to go after grants that might help revitalize housing or do other smaller projects for the good of the neighborhood. We have set up a scholarship fund for children of our neighborhood who might like to or prefer to be at a private Christian school, but they can't afford it. And it's funded by donations, and we have sent a number of children from the neighborhood to Pittsburgh Urban Christian School and Trinity Christian School.
We have done a Transform the Triangle for about 15 years. It really was just seeing the need to help in the neighborhood.
We had some youth come here in the summers to join us in what we were doing. As part of that, they would just go clean up in the area. They would pick up trash, and we'd weed some properties. And some of them said, could we do something more, maybe more lasting or tangible? So we came upon this idea to pay attention to some of these vacant properties that are a blight on any neighborhood.
We had a consultant come mid-2000s, and he said people feel safer in a neighborhood if the plywood on the abandoned homes is painted. So that gave us this idea with our volunteer groups in the summer that we could paint the plywood, make it look like dressed up doors, windows with a cat in it, curtains, and then it feels safer for passersby. It's amazing how many boards will get painted in a summer by our volunteers and the people who come out and who are willing to handle those heavy boards and put them up.
And so we thought, well, that's something we can do to help protect and preserve the neighborhood until such time as people can move into those houses, or they can be demolished in the case that they're too far gone.
What's happened is we've gotten a lot of community support. The borough has always donated the plywood. We get paint donated. Of course, it's all volunteer work. And more recently, we get like the Pittsburgh Mobile Toolbox to help. Penn Hills Rental, they donate supplies, Home Depot, Giant Eagle. It's not just us. People see what needs to be done, and they encourage us by giving their support.
And then out of that, there was the idea for Wilkinsburg Christian Housing, because if you go a step beyond helping the vacant properties, how can you turn over some properties and make them livable again, and bring people back in to dwell there?
Lynette was in my study one day, and we were talking, and I just sort of looked out the window and I said, I envision an orchard out there some year that would bless the neighborhood. Little did I know that she would take that and really run with it. And she and her husband, Tim, did a lot of research to find out, well, what would it take to get those properties? And they ended up buying the property on which the orchard is located. And when they moved back to Canada, they sold it to the church. We are now looking out to see how we can get those other two properties where the pollinator garden is. Thought, well, if you're putting in an orchard, what better thing to do than to put in a pollinator garden that would help pollinate the orchard itself, as well as add beauty to the corner.
Initially, I helped people in the neighborhood to learn how to garden and how to raise crops. The long-term vision for the orchard was that the fruit could be given away to the neighborhood. There are apples, pears, peaches, cherries, pluots, nectarines. So they've got 20 fruit trees there. All of these people who didn't know us from a hole in the ground, basically, donating their time, their resources, their money, So if you look at that Grace and Fruit Pollinator Garden sign, you will see all of the people who contributed to the building of the orchard and the gardens. The first fruit that came from it last year, an apple, Pastor Pete, he was so kind to mail one to me.
This is probably the best summer yet, with fruit growing on the trees and the bees and the pollinator garden. Just what that was even 10 years ago. And now it's transformed into a garden. And with the Strong Neighbors Committee, I definitely think we have a vision and we can work towards achieving it, because we have a good thing here. And if you can build on that good thing, we're going to get stronger.
This auditorium is a fantastic space. It's beautiful. The singing reverberates to the ceiling.
So one of the first things that people will recognize or see when they come and join us maybe on a Lord's Day morning for worship is unaccompanied singing of the Psalms. And it's beautiful. We have a beautiful building that amplifies that and highlights that fact.
Someone commented after a few visits, they were already a Christian, they're church shopping, and she's like, you guys haven't changed your service in 300 years. And yeah, that's us. We've never used musical instruments in worship as a Reformed Presbyterian church, and we don't use a choir up front, and we really just use our voices as our instruments to God. We'll never change that, and we're just going by what we believe the Bible says about how you are to worship God. And because we don't have instruments, you have to learn to sing well. And we sing in 4-part harmony. We have the bass, tenor, alto, and soprano. And you won't hear better singing in a congregational church than a Reformed Presbyterian church. And Wilkinsburg is blessed because they have one right here at 1300 Swissvale Avenue.
This is a building, this is concrete and glass and wood. There's nothing about it to be revered in and of itself. What we believe makes a space sacred is the presence of God. And so at this point, when the building is just about empty, it is an auditorium, but when the people of God gather here, it is a sacred space.
We are totally committed to Wilkinsburg and doing what we can to make it a better place to live and work and play and worship, and we're glad to be your neighbor.